Moving on, it's been 9 years of the Narendra Modi government at the centre. A Morgan Stanley report has now hailed India's growth during his term. The report specifically assessed last 9 years under the Modi government and compared it with growth even under the UPA. They have highlighted 10 big transformations under Modi government. They've come to a conclusion that India's infrastructure has changed drastically. There has been a significant increase in the number of digital transactions, for example, and electrification of the railways route. First, let's take a look at the top highlights of that report. Today's India is different from what it was in 2013. That's really one of the punching statements of this report. In 10 years, India has gained positions in the world order. India will emerge as a key driver for Asia and global growth. GDP productivity growth differentials to swing in India's favor. And it also goes on to say that New India, this is a term, remember, the BJP uses, will drive a fifth of global growth through the decade. They have predicted a boom in India's economy in this decade, but that was subjected to a few risks as well, which is interesting. A global recession that can impact India's economy and growth, a fragmented outcome in 2024 general elections, and that's going to be our focus as well. It has also talked about the fact that predictions will fail if there's a sharp rise in commodity prices due to supply outages, some of which we've witnessed recently, and shortages in skilled labor supply is also a risk for India. Out of this, what has caught everyone's eye is, of course, the mention of a fragmented vote or mandate in 2024. So is a clear mandate a key for India's growth? Let's go across to the guests who are joining us, Santosh Mehrotra and Vijay Sadana, both economists on the show. Vijay Sadana, let me begin with you. How do you look at this report that is clearly one, if I begin at the very top, talking about the big transformation under Narendra Modi Sarkar, and while it is not a matter of much debate, I think one of the fundamental things that have improved, especially in the last 5 years or in this term of the Modi government, is also big ticket infrastructure. And that has been acknowledged and talked about in this report.
Yeah, first of all, good evening to all of you. This is true. Not only the physical infrastructure, but also the delivery infrastructure. What we have seen is various roads, highways and everything, airports, ports, anywhere you go to the country, they all are visible development changes. At the same time, we have seen how this whole delivery system through Digital India, whether it is transferring money to farmers, poor, ladies, different accounts, that's another IT infrastructure or backbone in the country, which is making a whole lot of difference. So no doubt, things have improved. Another area which we have to look at is also the amount of AIIMS and other institutions which are under development and already in places. Tourist infrastructure, which is also attracting a lot of tourism in the country. So overall, definitely there is an improvement. Whatever we say that things have not improved or whatever, but I think the visible evidence is what report says is definitely an acknowledgement of the development which is taking place in the last so many years.
Before I come to the political aspect that this report has touched in, it has said that one of the key risks to this projection is a fragmented mandate in 2024, putting the spotlight on the next general elections. Mr. Mehrotra, your opening comments on the report itself. Very clearly, it has given a thumbs up and a stamp of approval on the economic aspects of the Narendra Modi government and how it says that India of 2023 is not the India of 2013.
If not the India of?
2013.
Yeah, it's not the same India. 10 years have passed. But let's just remember what the job of a investment banking organization, an international investment banker like Morgan Stanley is. Its whole objective is to try and make India appealing to foreign investors. So it has no choice but to put a positive spin on everything. Other than the infrastructure investment having gone up and infrastructure delivery having gone up, I can point to you 10 problems with this report. And if you don't mind, I will begin straight away. So its first slide is about supply side policy reforms, about corporate tax rates now down to 23%. And of course, in the case of new investments, it's down to 15%. So clearly, corporate tax revenues have actually fallen. They have fallen by 1.4 lakh crores per annum. So while another part of the report talks about formalization and GST increasing, the fact of the matter is when you take into account both direct taxes as well as indirect taxes, meaning corporate as well as GST, the tax to GDP ratio has not risen at all.
But isn't a decreasing corporate rate a fundamentally pro-growth and pro-corporate sector demand that was coming from the corporate sector as well?
A demand coming from the corporate sector has not necessarily translated into an increase in private investment to GDP. The investment that has increased is on account of public investment, which is what I began by talking about, which is infrastructure. In addition...
All right, I get your point. You're saying that everything is not rosy, but I don't know if anybody's suggesting that. But you're suggesting that, this report is because it wants to sell India. The reality is that all reports in the past were not trying to sell India when the product wasn't good. You can only sell when the product is good. And there is, of course, several other parameters or other reports by which India is emerging as the bright spot, even in a tough economical aspect. But I want to focus on the issue of mandates. Vijay Sardana, what this report is also highlighting is possibly continuity and stability in government, especially in a country like India at the central level, is key to continued rate of growth.
This is true. They say one of the bigger challenge around the world is that when the government or the policy makers change or guards change at the policy making level, there was a disruption in policy continuity or stable policy environment. That is why you remember when the WTO came into existence, one of the major agenda of WTO around the world was that there has to be a stability and predictability for the investors and the investment community so that their investment should not go waste. And there is a need to have a reduced political risk. Definitely, this is one of the risks always there in the economy, in especially democratic setup. But by and large, I don't think that any government which will come in power will make a drastic U-turn on any of the development policies. Yes, priorities may change. That is one aspect we have to factor in. Whether it was Manmohan Singh government, after that Modi government, I think the country's some of the major policies remain in the growth phase.
Okay, but what about a fractured mandate? A fractured mandate, and that is the message. And I think that's the message that suits.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah, that suits obviously the incumbent in this case. While what we see in Indian politics today is a lot of opposition parties wanting to come together, what this report is suggesting is, anything that falls short of a majority could bring down the rate of growth.
Absolutely, because many of the smaller parties, when they form a group of so-called coalition government, they all are short-sighted because their question of existence is always there. And the only way for existence of directionless political parties, freebies, or giving some sort of a distorted benefit to the voters / citizens. So there is always a threat of coalition government derailing the development path. But if there is an absolute majority, I think there will be policy stability. This remains as a risk in any democratic system.
Yes, Mr. Mehrotra, your thoughts on this? how election mandates and the rate of growth or the trajectory of India's growth has been linked in this report?
Well, an investment banker shouldn't stray into areas in which they have absolutely zero expertise. So let me present to you the data which is completely counter to what the report is suggesting. The coalition government from 2004 to 14 was, by definition, a coalition government. And yet, they experienced 8% per annum GDP growth. Never since 2014 has this country on a consistent basis produced 8% growth pre-COVID. Forget since COVID. Since COVID, it's 2.5%. So honestly, they shouldn't be straying into areas in which, they have no expertise. In any case, most of this report is written by credit analysts and not by economists. There are a couple of economists in the team. Let me go back to the report itself.
Sir, I have limited time. 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
It makes one of the 5 points it makes, which is a great achievement in the last 9 years, is about the IBC, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the impaired loan ratio at a 12-year low. Well, how has this come about? It's come about because this government has decided to solve matters through the IBC by writing off 87% of all the loans. That's how banks have managed to reduce their gross NPAs to total advances. So is this the way forward?
Okay.
No one in the banking sector who's assessing this situation believes that that's the case.
Okay, sir, I've got limited time. Let me give 30 seconds final comments to Mr. Sardana as well. Your final comments on whether this report is truly reflecting India correctly.
This report definitely highlights a positive opinion about India, whether for investors or those who are looking at India as a destination. There is always a scope for improvement, and that is where the role of policymakers and parliament is, that how to reduce the risk and how to improve the positive environment for the investor and the growth trajectory. I think this report is nothing except that precisely what India wants to do. And anything which is negative is a responsibility of policymakers to take corrective actions, reduce the risk so that investors' confidence goes up.
Okay.
Otherwise, why you need government if you cannot reduce the risk for investors? So that is what one has to look at.
All right. I'll leave it at that. I do thank both of you for joining us. This is certainly going to be a report that is going to be talked about as far as, what has happened in the last 9 years in comparison to the previous 10 years and what can be looked forward to. I'll slip into a very short break right now. On the other side, we also have a very special story for you. Remember, there is a panel that is going to review the progress of the cheetah project at the Kuno National Park after 3 cubs and 3 adult cheetahs have lost their lives. Stay tuned. We'll get you more on this.